Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello everyone, welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I'm happy to be here with you today on this Monday post Solar Eclipse in Libra, post my birthday. It was such an interesting weekend. I don't know how you all were feeling, but perhaps it was the compounding effect of having a solar return on an eclipse. It was very interesting. I normally feel a lot on my solar return. It's funny because birthdays for me, in particular from my birthday, other people's birthdays are a different story. It's very celebratory. My birthdays are a little bit more introspective, quiet. I don't want to say somber, but they are emotional because I have my sun and my Mercury in my 12th house. So there's always this emphasis and flavor of endings, depth, that sort of, like color my birthdays. And so each year it's actually a very powerful, profound time. And I love Libra season so much, but there's something about my birthday in particular where I kind of go down into my little hobbit hole and feel. I just need space to really feel. And Saturday, this weekend really provided that for me. I went to the trees. I knew I was having an eclipse on my birthday. I knew that last year, of course. And so my solace, my happy place is nature, specifically the trees, because I find so much grounding and anchoring among trees. And not just any trees, but the giant redwoods and the sequoias that are in Yosemite National Park. And I had spent time in Yosemite in 2018 during a snowstorm, November of 2019, a snowstorm. And it was kind of the beginning of my journey to Los Angeles. And it was during my big road trip with Arlo, and to come back at this point, feeling like a completely different person, just reflecting. I think the 12th house really provides a lot of information about our past and where we've been and what we're bringing into this life to heal. And for me, it's a lot around loss and my relationship with loss, my relationship with justice and balance, with Libra being in my 12th house. There's so much heaviness in the world right now. And I really wanted to talk today about how you can find some sliver of peace amidst chaos, and not just the chaos of the world, because that is, of course, very present, I think, in all of our hearts right now, but the chaos of this astrological climate, which is directly, of course, impacting the world climate, the geopolitical climate, the climate in the Middle East and Israel and Gaza, and what we're seeing play out on, the geopolitical sphere. And to be totally honest with you, this birthday was quite dense. It was heavy. It brought so much to the surface around ways in which I have been sort of abandoning self or pulling out of my center point in order to tend to things, people, the circumstances around me. This feeling of being almost a little disconnected from self, or a bit lost, not quite understanding what it is exactly I'm feeling, and realizing that I have not created enough space for myself to just be, to feel. I need a lot of alone time being a 12th house sun. I need, and a Mercury. I really need, I find and I receive my messages when I'm quiet, when I am alone. Messages for other people I receive in, lots of different ways because I'm typically working with someone and we're channeling. But for myself, I really find myself in solitude, in travel, in removing myself from my typical normal framework and coming back to myself through experiences that expand me. And I don't know if you all have been feeling this, but the last few weeks, the veil has been so thin. Like, I don't know about you all, but I've been hella psychic the last few weeks. Of course, like when I'm tapped and tuned in and I'm just receiving messages all the time, but this has been really, really thin. And the synchronicities, the messages, the symbolism that's been coming through has really kind of been blowing my mind. But I've been realizing how heavily affected I have been by the collective energy over the last few months, starting with, the weight of the situation with the animal shelters in Los Angeles and really across the country. It's really been surfacing my grief, frustration, anger around injustice, around our lack of learning, clarity, empathy, compassion for other beings, for this planet, for other humans. And I have a Mars in Aries that's opposite my sun, not directly, but and then my Sagittarius moon. And so there's a lot of fire that gets activated when injustice occurs. And I felt that since I was very, very young. And I feel this young part of me getting activated, this frustrated, angry part that sees all of the injustice and sees, the zoomed out perspective of humanity not learning lessons, the cyclical nature of humanity making mistakes and having to correct it and just kind of repeating the same things over. And that is really dysregulating for me. I've also been tuned into the collective grief, the collective anger, grief as well. So things that aren't quite mine that I'm processing for the collective as well. And have really realized that I've been sort of almost hijacked in a way by what's occurring, which is really, really normal and happens a lot, especially when you're a deep feeling person, you're highly sensitive, you're empathetic. It is essential to learn the tools and practices to be with the pain of the world, but not be consumed by it. And of course, my Libran self was feeling almost ashamed or guilty for taking this short weekend for myself to be in nature, to immerse. I felt, bad for leaving Arlo. I hadn't been away from him in over a year. And I was worried that he would pass while I was gone, which sometimes happens with animals. They do pass when they're alone because that's what they choose sometimes. But I felt guilty for all of the families that are being impacted by what's happening in the Middle East. And I just, felt my own ancestral imprints getting activated by war. We each and every single one of us has been impacted by war, whether it's not in, even if it's not in our physical current existence, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA, it's in our bones. And the feelings of injustice that get activated, the grief, the fear, the anger that gets activated resonates so deeply within us because we've all been impacted by war in some way, shape, or form. And the current community, of course, that's being activated, their oppression and their pain is very recent. And so if you're listening to this and you're feeling that activated deep within you, even if you aren't Jewish or Palestinian or you don't have loved ones there, there's something within you that's getting activated. Not only what's occurring right now in the Middle East, but there's also a lot that's energetically at play. We have an unstable political system. We have a lot of turmoil, upheaval, a lot of, for those of us that are very psychic and, sometimes receive information and data before it occurs, we can probably feel the rumblings of what this next year looks like and the next few years. And it's quite dense and it's tumultuous, and it can activate our own survival systems within us. And I just always like to remind each and every one of you that we have, a mind, a consciousness that's expanding rapidly. We have grown at a rate that is unsustainable to our physical bodies. The way in which technology and science, the way we communicate, the way we connect with the world has accelerated so rapidly, our physical bodies have not been able to catch up. So we're really wired physically. Our nervous systems, our immune systems are wired to receive data from our immediate area, right? So we only know, our systems are wired to only know what's occurring around us within our sphere, within our tribe or our geographical location. And right now we're receiving minute by minute updates on what's occurring all over the world, not even just, in Israel, but in Ukraine, in South America, in places that we've actually never visited, that we might not have a genetic imprint there, but we are feeling the collective pain because we are highly sentient beings. And I'm not saying that this is bad by any means. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be informed. I'm saying that our physical bodies are not wired for the amount or the input of information that we receive on a daily basis. And so our systems, our physical symptoms, interpret the urgency, the turmoil as a threat, which it is, but it's not an immediate threat to our physical safety, right? But it's interpreting it as that. So if you're feeling a lot of dysregulation right now, it makes sense. Our physical bodies are feeling like we're at war. We're in war times, and we've been really doing a lot of work around this over the last few years with the nodes being in Taurus and Scorpio, with really starting to understand the nervous system, how to heal through somatic work, really paying attention to the body, the physical form, presence, and the importance of that. And there's so much duality right now, right? There's this knowing, even being in Yosemite, I was like, okay, I know right now I am safe. My physical body is safe. I feel so deeply for those who aren't, and who can't sleep because they're afraid of what might occur physically in and around them. Deepening into the presence of Yosemite, of such an incredibly sacred place, sacred valley, finding safety within that space, but at the same time feeling all of the pain and turmoil that occurred on that land as well. And just our colonization of this country, and how, yes, we have protected Yosemite and other sacred sites, national parks, but there's still just this exploitation of the land. We've taken it from other people's. We have, there was a lot of exploitation happening before we actually started protecting it as a national park. And there's still, cars everywhere and people driving through. And of course I was as well, but it just felt like, it feels like we're in such an incredible portal of change and learning as humans. And that learning curve is very tender. That learning curve carries a lot of weight because there's such a heavy impact on our decisions. Carry such a heavy weight, have such a heavy impact on not only ourselves but the planet, the land, other people's. So there's just a lot. There's a lot to process right now, and it's really, really important to honor your own capacity, your own thresholds, what you actually need in the present moment to be strong and steady for the energy, right? For those of us that aren't in physical war, it's in many ways our responsibility to process the emotions around it, to feel what we need to feel, and to care for our own nervous systems so that we can show up strong, regulated, and hold the frequency for the rest of the planet. the space between eclipses, we have another eclipse on October 28th. This space in between, I've been talking about this a lot for years, really, but like when we get close to eclipses, I always try to remind people that this is a very chaotic time. There's a lot swirling around. The actual eclipse point, the time of the eclipse can feel so peaceful because you're in the eye of the storm. But on the thresholds of that, on the fringes of the actual eclipse, like in between eclipses, on the other side of them, we're in that, it's almost like a hurricane. Like you're in this sort of, in the space of the winds whipping around and feeling the actual impact of the storm. And so it's important to remember that when we're in this space, the most important thing we can do is self-regulate, co-regulate, to find our breath, our presence, our sense of peace within before we act. Because when we bring our emotional response to situations, especially if it's, if we're on the fringe and we aren't in the actual trauma of it, or if we're not in the middle of the war or the middle of the storm, it's really important for all of us to anchor the frequency, to process our emotions as we go, as needed, to be with what's surfacing, to not ignore, but to maintain and manage our capacity with responsibility so that we can hold space for those who are in the thick of it. And so take the space you need, find your breath, find your presence. The next few weeks hold a lot of change, inevitable change. These are karmic realignments. It's really hard sometimes during eclipse season to reckon with what's occurring, right? Because so much of it is out of our control. We're typically experiencing things that feel very uncomfortable. For example, something I've been moving through outside of what I've listed is a move, like an inevitable move that has been, kind of being called in for a while, but that feels, timely and I feel ready for it. But specifically losing a dear soulmate, Scuttle, the dog that I've been, you may or may not be familiar with his story, but he passed away suddenly after an operation. He was getting ready to be rehomed to the San Juan Islands on October 14th, the day of the eclipse, and the week before just had a freak accident and passed away. And Haley, his foster mom, who has just been such an angel, such an incredible support to him, really showed him love for the first time. Been grieving with her and just questioning why would, God take a being like this that had moved through so much adversity, abuse, neglect, finally got into a place of healing and then was taken away. And it really brought me into my deep layers, my own emotional experience with loss and what I needed to process through my 12th house in order to come back to my center point. And I was lucky enough yesterday while I was driving home, because I received quite a bit of clarity on this trip. I realized, I'd been kind of outside of my center point. I wasn't really caring for myself in the ways I needed to because things had been so busy, and I've been doing a lot of client work and supporting a lot of people, and doing my typical Libra thing where I, burn out and then shut down. And so I realized, I have to be more present with my needs, to check in with my inner child more, my nervous system. And I just felt called on the drive home yesterday to look up a Zach Bush podcast. And if you're not familiar with Zach Bush, he's just, I think, a true conduit of light for the Aquarian age. He represents the light of the Aquarian age, not the shadow, but the light. He is a scientific mind with a deep Christ consciousness, spiritual heart. He has such a huge heart, and he operates from his heart and allows his mind to make it possible, which is different than a lot of what we see in the world now as far as leaders. And so Zach Bush is a medical doctor, and he also has been starting movements to improve the quality of our food. He believes in like a ground up approach, which I do as well, and that we have to tend to our roots, tend to the earth, tend to our own internal roots, our connection to self and to source, before we can actually change the world. And his messaging was exactly what I needed to hear. It was this zoomed out perspective that was also so grounded. And it was the importance of caring for self-sovereignty and self-responsibility, and moving from a space of connectedness to self in order to create healing on the planet, to create healthy connections, to find that balance we so desire, to respond to the injustice, to the wars, to the death, the killings, the pain, the grief, the anxiety, the fear that we're feeling, with a deepened connection to self, which creates a deepened connection to faith, to source, to all living and breathing things, and to move from victim to creator, from victim to manifester, knowing that each and every single one of us can change the world by being in our unique vibration, by finding our center point and moving from that space. Activism is changing. And so I just invite all of you to take some space this week, over the next few weeks, to find yourself again, whatever that looks like, with it being, with us being in Libra season and these eclipses occurring in Libra and Taurus. There's certainly a theme of earth, nature. Even though we've done so much to Mother Earth, to rock her, to change her cycles, perhaps to create destruction, there's actually this life force within her that is much, much bigger than us, and she's able to regenerate and repair. And it's really our jobs to support that process for her, to ignite that process within us as we're not separate, and to really remember that we belong, that we're important, that we matter, that we are just one piece of this beautiful, complex matrix of organic matter and love on this planet. And when we look for blame in situations, there is a misalignment. When we need someone to blame, when we see someone as the enemy, it's creating disconnection and therefore separation, misalignment in the energy, and an inability to actually fully and completely heal. So I am not asking for you to forgive Hamas, or to forgive the perpetrators of this war, or to forgive the animal abusers, or to forgive the people in your life that are causing pain. But I invite you into a deepened connection to self, where you can find that infinite well of unconditional love for yourself, for the planet, for the world, and to operate from that space of grounding, that space of centering, because that's where real change occurs. Before communicating, finding your heart, communicating from the heart, the higher heart, rather than the wound. And this is how we heal the world. And it's so wild because I pulled the whale card today from the Untamed Elemental deck. And a whale is all about communication. And it says, vibrations of melodic patterns pulsate through his element, echoing and resounding in harmony. Whale swims to remote destinations, expressing a composed symphony that keeps Earth's magnetic fields in balance. He sends his calls far and wide by pressing his mouth to the ocean floor, summoning and selecting his mate through audible transference. He seduces with caution and tenderness, the magnetism of two hearts beating as one is real, a recognition exchanged. When there is an authentic connection, there's familiarity with oneself as much as with the other. His is a language of honesty, of transparency. Whale calls you to dive deeper in your communication. Authenticity is a salve that heals disconnection and makes you a magnet for healthy relationships. Notice when social conditioning overtakes your vulnerability. Is there a more honest part of yourself that is ready to be heard? Speak from your heart, and you will open the gate for others to speak from theirs. your trustworthiness will shine. Compassion and truth will be defining qualities of your communications, serving as a much needed balm to all of humanity. And as we work through, of course, the layers of social media, and it's really, kind of what I was saying before, it's really each of our own responsibility to process the emotions that are getting activated and to anchor back and into the higher heart and communicate from that space. And that's really where we create the resonance of unconditional love. It's how we change the world. And I don't want to discount boots on the ground activism, because that's so important, and putting into motion the change we want to see and taking charge. It's very Aries. But on the other side of that is the impact we can have by simply holding the frequency of unconditional love, processing what we need to process, and knowing that we have the ability to make great change by setting the intention to create it. In this eclipse time, this eclipse window, just reminding yourself that you are part of a very beautiful, intricate fabric of humanity, that everything that's occurring is occurring for a reason, and there's healing occurring even if it doesn't feel like it. Find your footing, find the earth beneath you, find your heart, and communicate from that space. Support from that space your loved ones, your friends, people within your community who are struggling, who are needing extra support. Know that if you have the resources now to regulate and to hold space, that it's a beautiful time to do so. And if all you can do is hold that higher frequency, that's beautiful as well. Thank you so much for being here, for being present, for your support. I do have my Eclipse Portal workshop that's still available. It will be available all through eclipse season. It's something that you can repeat as many times as you'd like. It's up on the link in my bio. It's a recording, so you can just listen to it and download it and save it forever. If you don't mind, the best way to support this podcast is to rate, review, to subscribe. All of those things help me so immensely. I am manifesting Zach Bush on the podcast, so if you guys want to join me in that, that would be so wonderful. I have a lot of other people I'd like to bring on as well, and people I'm already scheduling, but it's been fun to do these shorter, more digestible energy updates as well. So thank you all for your presence, for your hearts, and I will talk to you next week.